Jan De Silva. I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the technical workshop for this year's round of CPC applications. I'm excited to see so many people here in the audience, and I'm sure you'll have some really exciting projects that we're going to be deliberating on in January. So, first thing, I want to just go over the agenda very quickly. Welcome. And also, I want to mention that we have another CPC committee member in the audience, Jody Sievert. Jody's the vice chair. And also Jessica Bailey, the CPA manager, who will be coming up after I finish speaking. So, CPA. CPA is a law that was enacted in 2000. It's now in more than half of the communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And what it does is provide cities and towns the opportunity to use additional assessment money to help pay for open space, recreation, affordable housing or community housing, and historic preservation. So hopefully your projects fall within those categories. When you do the application, we'll be able to look at it. New Bedford voted to accept the CPA in 2014. And since about 2016, we've had a committee, we've awarded more than $12 million here in the city of New Bedford. And some of the people in the audience are previous recipients, so this is something that you all know, but for anybody who's a new applicant may not realize that we've given out more than $12 million in a variety of categories. So first part of the application process is to do an eligibility form, which is something that's due in the beginning of October. It's kind of a two-page application. That's how we determine whether or not you're eligible for the CPA program. And then we'll ask you to do a two-step application. We'll ask you to do a project application, which will be due in November, which goes into more detail about your projects. You do more narratives, you do a budget. So that way, that's what we're going to evaluate when we talk to you in January. Part of the process will be all applicants will come to the CPC in January and February and actually present their projects. This is usually 5 minutes per project. You'll come and you'll tell us what your project is. We will ask you questions, which you will answer. You're also allowed to bring your supporters to the meeting so they can speak in favor of your projects. We then spend the next couple of months deliberating on the projects, figuring out who we're going to award money to. We then present the list to the City Council. We meet with the City Council. They go over the projects. We answer more questions from them. And then they vote on the projects themselves. Hopefully, the whole process is done by June 1st through June 30th, and you'll be able to start the next fiscal year of July 2026 being a CPC recipient. So that's the end goal for everybody, right? Everybody wants to get money. I think this year, what do we have, 2 million, Jessica?
Looks like 1.7 right now.
So this year, we're going to have $1.7 million available to award to recipients. So it's a little bit smaller than previous years, and I'm not sure how many applicants we're going to receive. Last year, we had a bumper crop of applicants, and more than 27 applicants last year, so it's very competitive to actually be awarded the money. So that's everything here. I'm going to have Jessica come up and talk to you more in detail about the process, and then afterwards we're going to take questions from the audience about projects or whatever else you want to ask us.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me? I project pretty well. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you to those that are not first-timers. I wanted to explain the changes to the Step 1 eligibility determination to you because there are some changes this year. So as Jan mentioned, excuse me, we're going to talk a little bit about CPA, the process, that two-step process, as well as what happens once you receive funds and post-award. So as Jan mentioned, CPA has been in our community since 2000. We started in 2014 when it was approved, and 2016 was when we began collecting revenue. Excuse me. We've collected just over $12 million, awarded all of it, and that money has been leveraged by, I think, probably about almost dollar for dollar. So the Community Preservation Committee is an all-volunteer organization. As you can see, there's five boards and commissions that are represented on the CPA, and then there are 4 at-large members, and that's to allow the CPA to understand the needs of the community, both from the perspective of those boards and commissions, but also from the perspective of the citizens. And the CPC has 4 main responsibilities. That's to understand what the needs are, develop that plan, prepare an annual budget, and then make those project recommendations to City Council. There's 2 sources of funding. One is the local surcharge, which is after the first $100,000 of a property's value is exempted. It's based upon that calculation, and then the trust fund. And the trust fund is funded through the Registry of Deeds. When people record something, there is a small fee that goes into the CPA trust fund, and then it is divvied up to the communities across the Commonwealth. So there's spending requirements that are needed in our community. Every community is required to have that 10% for each of the 3 reserved categories. And the reason that the CPC has chosen to only do 10% is because every year we don't know what categories we're going to get the most applications in that are eligible, qualified applications. So if we were to put more than 10% in, that 10% is held even if they don't award in a specific category. A couple of years ago, we did not receive any category applications for community housing. That 180,000 rolled over to the next year. And while 180,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, for some projects that are coming in, it's, they maybe do a $50,000 project. So that could be 3 projects that they weren't able to fund. So the CPC is very conservative, and they put the minimum 10% in for the 3 categories. They reserve that 5% for admin, and the remaining 65 can be spread out over those 3 categories. And that's one of the beautiful things about CPA is that it's flexible based on the needs of the community. There's no mandate from the state other than you can only do one of these 3 categories, but you can do it in any amounts that you want. In some communities, they do more community housing and very little open space because they don't have it. Some communities do a lot of open space and a lot of affordable housing, especially on the Cape and the islands. So it allows the communities to determine that. And that's why for our community, the CPC does 10, 10, and 10. So this year, we have an anticipated budget of just over $1.7 million. The CPC presented the budget to the City Council. It was referred to Finance, and it goes before Finance Committee come September 18th, and then it'll go back out to Final Council for their approval. If it's approved, there'll be $1.7 million to award for this year's applicants. Last year, as Jan mentioned, we had a record number of applications. The application total requested was double what the CPC had. So it is a very competitive process. The CPC does their best to award to as many projects as possible that are shovel-ready, that meet the criteria, but also can move forward in the current fiscal year. So that they are very committed to getting the funds out into the community and spent as quickly as possible on these eligible projects. You'll see that it's divvied up in that 10% category across the 3 top, and then the reserve is about 1.1, and that could be split, as I said, on any of those 3 categories. So tonight we're really going to talk about what is eligible, because some of you may have ideas that you've been thinking about and you're not quite sure it's eligible or you think it's eligible, but this chart, which was developed by the Department of Revenue, can help you. So as you can see on that side, there's action words, which we call acquire, create, preserve, support, rehab, and restore. And then you can ask your question across, can we acquire open space? Yes. Historic? Yes. Yes, all these. There are no's in certain categories, and then there's certain categories that have caveats. And then housing has another caveat for support. You cannot use CPA money for maintenance. That is across the board. You cannot use it for any of these categories. You cannot use it for maintenance. But you can use it to preserve, rehabilitate, or restore. So this chart is really handy. And if you look at it and you still have questions, you can call me or email me. That's part of my role as a CPA manager, is to support the applicants throughout this entire process and throughout your entire grant process as well. I'm going to talk very briefly about each of the categories because tonight is really about how to fill out the application so you can have a successful application. This presentation will be on the website. If you signed in when you came in, I will add your name if you're not already on our email list so that you'll receive a link to this presentation because Cable Access is filming it. There'll also be the link for this PowerPoint and the link for the Step 1 eligibility determination forms. As you can imagine, New Bedford is a city and it doesn't have a lot of open space. We've only had one project over the 9 years that we've been doing CPA in our community. That was in the North End. But this is the definition of what would be defined under open space. Recreation. Recreation is our second highest awarded category. We have done work in all of the large parks across the city, as well as some of the smaller parks. And please be aware that it is for outdoor only recreational, both passive and active recreation projects. It cannot be used for stadiums or gyms or turf fields or maintenance. It is for outdoor. We've done everything from basketball courts to a bowling green to 2 playgrounds at 2 different schools, so that there are various projects across the city that have received recreational funding. Also, for recreation, your project must be open to the general public. We've had organizations who've reached out and said, we have a playground that's for our clients only, and because it's closed to the clients, the CPC has declined to fund it because it's not open to the general public, because they are very aware of the fact that this money is taxpayer money that they are spending, and they want to make sure that all can have that public benefit. Historic resource. As you can imagine, this is our #1 category. We are a very historic city. We have nonprofits that are living in historic buildings. We have a lot of historic pieces that are part of our art collection. George right there is actually looking fantastic. He was a CPA funded project where he was restored and rehabilitated. And we've worked with the library on a number of other things where it's artifacts. We've worked with a number of other community organizations that they are digitizing their collections so that those collections are available to the general public online. But in addition, we have worked on a number of projects that have a dual purpose, that are not only historic, but they're also creating affordable housing. And there's about 17 projects have received 23 grants over the course of the 9 years, and we've funded or provided funding to the creation of 185 affordable housing units over the last 9 years. It doesn't sound like a large number, but it's a number that's gone up every single year. Our very first year, we had 2 projects that were affordable housing. Last year, there were 6. So that shows you the evolution of CPA from the very beginning when we saw a lot of historic and recreation, and now we're swinging more towards affordable housing, historic, and recreation more equal. So that's, again, the thing about CPA is that the city can roll with it. The applications that the CPC receives in indicate the need in the community based on what you all are submitting to the CPC. And the CPC responds to that as much as they can. So community housing, that is up to 100% of AMI. It's as I've said, we have funded projects all across the community. Between projects that are both historic and community housing, 26% of CPA funding over the last 9 years has gone to projects that have some affordable housing or community housing component. Something that you all need to know, and that if you have a board, needs to know, is that there are restrictions tied to these funds. Because it is public money, the public benefit must be protected, and it is protected through one of these restrictions. The open space funding that took place up in the North End, that has an open space, a conservation restriction on it in perpetuity. For this CPC, the vast majority of historic resource projects either are required to get a perpetual preservation restriction or a 30-year term preservation restriction, and that protects the public benefit. It's the cityscape that we are working to preserve and to keep intact. And then for community housing projects, the vast majority of the time, there's other funders that are coming in that are saying, for those units, we need to have a housing restriction of X number of years on these units, and the AMI has to be no more than this. That satisfies the CPC's requirement, so that, and we really don't have open space agricultural, but please be aware that that will be one of the funding conditions that your board will have to agree to. So if that's something your board is going to say, we're not doing that, then I would advise you not to apply for this funding, because it will be a restriction. It will be on your funding conditions as part of your grant. So the plan is about this big. It's really not that much. It is available as a PDF online. I strongly encourage you to review it, because in it you will find out not only the history of CPA, and you can kind of skip that if you want, but it'll talk about how the projects are reviewed, the application process. It has everything in there that'll help you put together a successful application. In addition to that, on the website, we also have last year's FY25 applications available, so you can look at examples of what information people were provided. So if you go onto the city's website, the drop-down for city offices is Community Preservation Committee. Click on that. There'll be a banner at the middle, and you click on Community Preservation Committee, and then it'll say FY25 applications. The PDFs are there for every single application they received last year, and they are a great resource to answer any of your questions, to say, you know, their project was similar to ours. What did their application look like? So I would encourage you to take a look at that as well. So as Jan mentioned, there's 2 steps for this process. And the reason there's 2 steps is because the CPC felt that it was really important for us to have an understanding of the eligibility, and for you all to have that understanding before you put together your application, because the eligibility determination form is a 1-page, double-sided. The application is multiple pages with multiple attachments that need to be provided. So before you went through that work, the very first step is your project eligible? If it's determined to be eligible, does not mean that you will get funding. It just means that you're eligible to do that next step. If you don't do step 1, you do not get to apply in step 2. If you're not sure about your project, call me. We can talk it through. We can refine it so that your scope falls within the eligibility, so that you can apply. And if you're on the fence about, I'm not sure if we're going to do it, put the eligibility application in, because it's due on September 26th. And if October 2nd you say, you know, we're not ready for it, and you don't want to put in a full application, even though we've said, yes, you're eligible, it's fine. You can come back next year. It is not held against you that you have changed your mind, that you are not ready to put in an application this year. So a couple of dates. Today, here we are kicking off yet another cycle. It's pretty amazing. The step 1 eligibility determination is going to be due at noon on September 26th. Late submissions will not be received, they will not be accepted, and they will not be reviewed. So by noon. Absolutely positively, you can send them to me early. I like early applications. I love early applications. So please, be very cognizant of the noon deadline. By the 3rd of October, you will know whether or not your project was eligible. And if it was not, in the letter that you receive, it'll say this is why it did not fall within the scope of CPA guidelines. If you are eligible, you'll receive a fillable step 2 application with all the information about what you need to do. And then as November 14th comes around, we started this during COVID because of restrictions. What we did was I took everyone's name, wrote it on a piece of paper, literally threw it in a hat, and pulled out the names, and I signed times for everyone to come in to drop off their applications. I know coming in at 8 o'clock in the morning is horrible. So your bonus prize is that you get to choose what date and time in January you can do your presentation. So you can choose whatever time or date works for you, and there's usually 3 dates in January where we do these presentations. So that's what you get for being the early bird. Then, as Jan said, there's presentations, the CPC deliberates, they send to City Council, they vote, and then we do the awards. So the first thing you need to determine, though, is do you own what you want to do the project on with? You need to know that. So if you are leasing a building and you're doing something that's a artifact or something that your nonprofit owns, you don't need to worry about ownership. Your nonprofit owns it. Your landlord has nothing to do with this application. If you are in a city building, then you need to talk with the responsible city department, because they would be the applicant and then you would be the co-applicant. If you're doing it in the Parks and Rec would be the primary applicant, and your, say, Friends group would be the co-applicant. So you have to think about that, because it's very important, especially for city property, because there's procurement issues and questions that need to be addressed. So a lot of you have done this before, and I appreciate you all coming tonight, because we are changing it up just a little bit for the step one process. So typically we asked for this information in step two, but we found that we had questions that needed to be answered in the step one process. So beginning this year, and you will see it on the the step one eligibility determination on the back page, there is a page that looks like this. And on this, you will need to make sure that when you submit your eligibility determination form, you will also be providing to us our certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State's website. There is a small fee involved in that. It's around $12, I think. You would just need to send us a PDF of it. I would highly recommend when you order it, you take a screenshot or you somehow make a PDF of the receipt in the event that the certificate doesn't arrive in time, so you can present that. The CPC will accept that as proof that you have ordered that, and then you can send the certificate in. Additionally, your list of a board of directors, if you have one, we would need to see that, as well as a copy of your 501c certificate. If you're a 501c3, C4, whatever you are, that needs to be presented as well and submitted with the eligibility determination. If you are a corporation, you still need to find your certificate of good standing because you're registered with the state, Secretary of State's website. It looks like this. So you go up here and you'll add your name in here, and then click on search, and then right here is request certificate. It'll take you to that page that you need to complete. I would highly suggest you, if you're going to apply, you would do it by the beginning of next week. I'm not sure what the turnaround time is for the certificates. So that way you'll have a certificate and you can just produce a copy through a PDF to the CPC. This is what the step one application looks like. There's a couple things you need to think about. Are you able to receive funds? Are you a nonprofit? Are you partnering with a nonprofit? Do you have that ability? If you're partnering with the city has to be the lead applicant. And you'll see here it says applicant and then co-applicant, and then who you are, if you're a city department or board, nonprofit, private citizen. Legal property owner. And again, if you're working on an artifact, then your organization owns it. And if it's like the city is coming in, of course, yes, the city of New Bedford is the legal owner. Yes, the owner is the applicant. Then your allowable uses. In some cases, it can be both. If someone's here and they are trying to purchase open space to create a recreational facility that would be open to the public, then it could be open space and recreation. If you are doing an adaptive reuse of an historic structure so that it would have a combination of, say, retail and affordable housing, then you could check both categories. It does not mean that you're going to get double the money. It just means that that's how we're tracking so that we know what categories we are funding, because we know based on our plan that we've gone through with all of the public process and all of the boards and commissions, we know what the high priorities are. And right now, I think all of you would agree that community housing is the thing that everybody is talking about. But the CPC is also cognizant of the fact that we can't neglect one thing over another, because there's only so much funding that the CPC has. So they're trying to do as much as they can for as many as they can. So if you are doing a historic resource project and you have not yet done this, right here, you can look up on the Mass Historic Commission, you can look to see, if you don't know this already, whether or not your object resource is on the state register. If it is not, then you need to contact Ann Lauro, who is our preservation planner, so that you can talk to her about what you are working on and have the Historical Commission determine if it has that significance within our community. It's cultural, architectural, historical significance. But I would start that process now. You don't need that determination for this step, but you will need it for step 2. And Ann and I work together so that she and I both know what is going on, which organizations, and some of your organizations may already have that. You may already have a designation, so it may not be something that you have to worry about, but you can check with Ann if you're unsure. So this is the back half of it. As I said, it's a really simple 2-pager. It's really to gather the information that we need so that the CPC can make a determination of eligibility. This portion here, and please, if you see the scroll bar start to show up here, you've written too many words. Please do not write too many words, because then it makes more work for me to like take that and cut and paste and make things. So please, not a lot of words. 500 is great, because all they need to know is what your scope is. They do not need to know when your organization was founded, how many people you have served, what community you're serving, any of that. They just need to know, I own building XYZ, I am converting it into affordable housing for people who have AMI of X. I am asking for funds for the historic exterior preservation of my building, and it would encompass masonry, roof, gutters, and windows. That's it. That's all they need. Everything else, all the other important stuff, is going to be in your application. Literally, it is the scope. That is all we need. And I assure you, if you just give the CPC that, you will not find a scroll bar showing up on your right-hand side. So, and again, September 26th, noon. So September 26th comes, the CPC, Jan, myself, and we meet, Jody, Melissa, we all have a meeting, review the applications to confirm that all of these, whether or not they're eligible under CPA. Then we send out an email saying, congratulations, here's your letter, you are eligible, here's the fillable application. You can see this application, it is in the plan, so you can look at it just if you want to start prepping what information you think you're going to need. But you can see what it's in, it's actually in your packets as well. So a couple of things that are really helpful. The project title does not need to be long. It's helpful if it isn't the same name as your organization. If it's a phase 2, that's perfectly fine. Phase 3, phase 4, that's fine. Please put the ward. Please put the ward, because we do track by ward. We try to make sure that CPA funding is spent across. It is not the defining decision for by any means, but for tracking purposes, it's helpful for us to know the ward so that we can then report to City Council and to ward members and ward residents what's being spent in their wards. So please find your ward. Please add zip codes. Zip codes are really super helpful too. So you're going to figure out a title, the location, and that sometimes the location is different from where your organization is headquartered, which is fine. Which category, estimated start date, estimated completion date. Oh, and let me go back one thing. So your total here, what's your total budget and your funding request, those numbers are the only thing that can change between this step and that step. Your scope, once it is determined to be eligible, cannot change. It has to stay the same. But the amount that you think your budget is and the amount you're going to ask for, that can change. Because once you start getting your quotes from contractors or vendors or whoever, you may say, oh, I thought it was going to be 25 and it's really going to be 32. That's fine. That's fine. You may get in between when this happens and when you apply, you may receive an award from another grantor, and that takes down how much you have to ask CPC for. Even after you've submitted your application, because we've had organizations come in and during their January presentation and say, hey, we got this grant, so we need $10,000 less than what we were asking you for. And that's helpful to the CPC, because then when they go to their deliberations, they can make sure that they'll take that 10 and give it to somebody else, because every year they're trying to spread it as thin as possible while being as effective as possible. So just keep that in mind, that you can change your numbers, but you cannot change your scope. So your funding request, and then your total project budget here, and then your applicant name, and then the co-applicant signature, and there are the boxes in the fillable. I hope it works. If it doesn't, please tell me if anything glitches. When you are coming on November 14th, you are going to bring a couple of things. You're going to bring me one flash drive that contains this application and all of your supporting documentation. The only thing that I need paper of is 12 copies, double-sided, 3-hole punched, of your application only. Each CPC member and myself gets a copy of the application, so when they're reviewing, they can take notes, they can go through the flash drive. We try not to kill trees, so this is how the CPC has the information at their fingertips during the presentations, but all the supporting information is on the flash drive. On your flash drive, we ask you to please organize by these category names, have a folder for each, and then the items that are under the here that you check off are in that applicable folder. It just makes it so much easier for the CPC to go looking exactly in the application folder if they're looking for something, because they had 27 applications last year. It's a lot. It is hours of review, so we ask you to just try to make it as organized as possible so it makes their time a little more productive, and also it keeps us from having questions at the January presentation that were already answered but just were in the wrong folder. So here's where you're going to tell us about yourselves. Not on eligibility step 1, here's where you're going to say what the project is. We want to build a playground for the children of this particular school and the surrounding community. We want to preserve this building that has this history because we provide services within it, but we can't find other funding for exterior preservation because it's really not out there. That's one of the reasons CPA was created, was because there's not a lot of funding for historic preservations, especially for nonprofits that reside in them. Then the community need and benefit. And you're going to look at the CPA plan and see what that need and benefit, how it is listed in the plan. It does change a little bit year to year, so you can take a look at what the needs, the plans, the goals, priorities in the community are. Excuse me. And then how are you going to measure success? X number of children play on it. The building will no longer have water intrusion because we've repointed the masonry. The windows will be weatherproof, and we will be able to have a lower electric and heating bill, which will help us put more money into our programs. Those are all measurable items that you can list. Community support. Community support is fantastic. Community support shows that you have people in the community who are your fellow citizens, who are probably taxpayers that are putting into CPA, that they support your project. It's great to have those letters with your application because it's right there. But they also are welcome to attend the January presentations, to make a statement to say we're in support of this project. Just also know that people can come and speak against a project. There is a public comment period that usually lasts till the day after the third night of presentations in January, at which the CPC will receive comments, and they review them all. I usually bundle them as they come in, and then they are able to look at them so that they can then review them when they start reviewing the overall applications after the 3 nights. So it's great if you have them in here. And you can just say, you know, X number of letters from various sources, or you can just say, please see attachments within the flash drive. And then critical need. What is the need? Why is this important? Obviously, we called FY20 before the pandemic. We literally finished, submitted to City Council the night before shutdown, March 12th. But that was the year of the roofs. We had 3 projects that came in that urgently needed roofs. And then the pandemic came in. And they still needed roofs because everything shut down. But because of the urgency for those because those buildings were in danger of collapse if they were not addressed, there were many very, very worthy projects that just did not get funding because the CPC looked at it and said, we have to address this because otherwise we'll lose these 3 resources, which are going to be converted into affordable housing in our community and are a blight in their neighborhood at this particular time. So we've had that. So that's urgent. Urgent is you have a project that you're like, we have to do this because we're getting water intrusion. We have to do this because we have an opportunity to purchase this building and it's a one-time deal, or we need to purchase this land. So those are all urgent things. You know, it's not always that urgent. So just talk about why it's needed, why you need like a resource. Like George was, you know, he was in trouble. He was like orange, and you know, he needed some work. You know, and as a community, we own an amazing collection, and as we are stewards of that collection. So, you know, that was an urgent need. Is the world going to stop because George looked bad? No. But as stewards, we need to take care of it. You know, there's buildings in our community that need assistance, that are the fabric of our community, that we've done exterior work on. And people drive by and don't realize that that building still stands because CPA put a little money into it. And it's important because people don't pay attention when it's diminished, but they certainly pay attention when it's gone. So CPA helps to put money into the community so that that critical need can be addressed. So now you can talk about yourselves, because it's about your capacity as an organization. You know, what your organization is like. You know, are you bringing in outside resources? Because honestly, not everybody's a project manager, and not everybody has a historic preservationist on staff. So are you reaching out to organizations that have that expertise to partner with you to get you through so that you can do this project and execute it in a way that is efficient and gets you to the end line without, you know, wasting money? How feasible is your project? You can see some of the questions are a little blurry here, but it'll ask you those questions like, how feasible is your project? Where are you in the permitting process if you have to have permits? Have you looked into, if you're doing something like digitization, have you already reached out to the vendors that do that kind of work? Have you worked with them to see like what timeline, if you receive this funding, would they be able to put you in their workflow, say next July, August? So, you know, how feasible, what groundwork have you done, or legwork have you done to set this up? Project maintenance. Project maintenance, the CPA's money is public money that the CPC is awarding to your project. They want to make sure that you're taking care of it. What is your maintenance plan? What are you going to do? Especially if and it could be in a maintenance plan, it's kind of a broad thing. Like if it's something they're digitizing, like it's been restored and preserved, how are you going to protect it? I'm going to pick on the Fort Taber, Fort Rodman Museum. They did a map, and then they had it encased in archival material so that it's protected from UV rays, and it halted the deterioration, and it protected it. So now it's on display for the public to see. The library has done many things with the whale book. The Whaling Museum has done whale books, and those are now part of a digital archive that is being used by researchers and genealogists across the country and the world. So, you know, but they're maintained and they're preserved and they're archived so that nothing's going to do something. The playgrounds, how are you going to maintain those playgrounds? You know, what kind of funds? The buildings, how are you going to have a maintenance plan? Is it going to be part of your budget? It doesn't have to be a long dissertation, but just address how you intend moving forward to protect the resource that the CPA money's being put into. This particular page talks about 3 different categories. So historic resources, projects, there's questions there for you to answer. And every historic resource project must comply with the U.S. Secretary of Interior standards. It's you can click on the link here. Ann can also explain it to you, and it's also included in the application instructions. So it gives you a little bit of an overview of what it is. If you have a project that is going to have ADA requirements, because there are times if you do a certain amount of work to a building and you exceed a certain threshold of the value of a building, that triggers ADA requirements when you do restoration or rehabilitation. So you may end up needing ADA requirements. And Cynthia and her staff at Community Services are fantastic and are happy to help and assist with any questions you may have, and they are the experts. I would advise you to, you can call me and say, do I need to? And if it's yes, I will send you to her and her staff. And then community housing requirements, and just talking about the project, the AMI, all of that. So, finances. Here's where you're going to talk about your funding, where you've gone for funding requests, how much funding you've raised already, whether or not you're going to come back, and it does not count against you if you're coming back. New Bedford does not get the same number of dollars as, say, Boston or Cambridge or some of the richer or larger communities do. So the CPC understands that you are going to have to come in phases. Majority of the projects that are the larger projects, like the First Baptist Church, Strand, Capitol Theater, Holy Family, Hillman Firehouse, they needed multiple years of funding for their projects because A, and how the projects were progressing, but also B, the size of the projects and the limited amount of money that we had to give each year. So you also will be providing estimated dates of your project schedule. If your project is going on right now, and there's a scope of work that you're going to complete before June 30th, 2026, this is not the application for you. You cannot ask for reimbursements on projects that are applied for. Typically, the City Council's final vote happens April, May. I think this year was April 10th. So by that date, the day after, any work that is done would be eligible for reimbursement. But we cannot start to disperse monies until after July 1st of 2026. So keep that in mind when you're talking about your project and what would be eligible to be reimbursed and would be, so that you can make sure that you're not putting the cart before the horse and doing work that then would not be eligible for reimbursement because it was done before City Council. Until the City Council does that final vote, this money does not exist for you all. So just be cognizant of that when you're looking. And usually, like I said, April, May, the latest was, again, COVID, and that was in the summer, but that was a very unusual year. The very first line here, it says New Bedford CPA FY26. That number should match the very first page's number of what you're asking for. If you've received funding for this project from another year of CPA, put it on a different line. And then here would be status of things that you're applying for or have applied for various grants or loans or whatever. It just provides the CPC with that information. Things you need to think about is that you will need 2 detailed quotes for whatever you're doing, or a cost estimate or a budget, a building assessment, or if it's a very specialized restoration, then it would only be one, and you can call me if you have a question about that, because there's not a lot of people who do certain things, especially in historic restoration. You know, so many people can only do columns or, you know, historic windows or such. So there are times when the CPC waives that requirement, but if you have questions, just call me or email me, ask me. The CPC loves it with a capital L, when the CPA money is leveraged, because the beauty of CPA money is that it can be used to match anything, federal, state, and private. There's no restriction. If you have any proof of funding was secured, and just remember there's no supplanting, you cannot be used to reimburse other funds and, you know, shuffle money like that. If you're doing a construction project and you already have a construction budget, you don't need to complete this, just send us your construction budget. Renderings, engineering plans, designs, all of that would be part of the digital information that you would provide on your flash drive. But if you don't have a construction budget, please fill this out. And then the last part is the certificate of vote of corporation and your tax compliance certification. So for the certificate of vote, the person who is named here is not the person who signs here. So if Jane Doe is the president of the corporation and is given permission to enter into contracts and sign applications, then it needs to be John Smith signing here as the clerk or whatever title that person has. It has to be two different people. Jane Doe can sign the tax compliance certification. And we need that so that we know that this person who submitted the application has the permission of your corporation to submit it. And then also when we get to the point where we're going to do the grant agreement, our purchasing department needs this. If you're doing work on a variety of buildings, this chart is fantastic because it'll tell you right here, if you're a private entity, you're working on a private entity, then no, you don't need to comply with procurement and prevailing wage laws. But if you're working on a park or a city-owned building, then yes, you need to partner with that the responsible department. They need to be the lead applicant, and you need to be cognizant of the fact that your budget will include procurement and prevailing wage laws. So that'll affect your budget because that has to be followed. And that's why partnering with the city department, not only because you have to have permission to do that, but also they are very familiar with this and can guide your organization through that process. So you all will show up on the 14th at your appointed time, submit the application, I'll put them all together, and the CPC will get their binders and their flash drives. And I say, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, have fun. And what are they looking for? So they're looking for things like, well, we know your project's eligible. What kind of public benefit does it have? Does it align with the plan? And is it a good use of public resources? All of those questions tie back to the questions in each of the different sections that you are answering so that you're giving that information throughout the application, that they're searching for it. Because when they're doing the application review, they're looking to see, are you meeting those criteria? They're meeting the primary and secondary criteria. Are you meeting the category criteria? And all of those questions that you're answering help them when they're scoring your project. And as Jan mentioned and I've mentioned, you have an opportunity to do a public meeting. I call it the 5-minute elevator speech, where you get up, it's all on Zoom, just in case you're wondering. We still do Zoom. You do a 5-minute speech. The CPC can ask any questions, and then people can speak for or against your project. It's a great opportunity for you to maybe make a point of how your project meets a specific goal or what the urgent need is, but it really is an opportunity for you to just be before the CPC to ask you questions, and for the community to show their support, or if they're against it, their opposition. Excuse me. The thing about the presentations is it's usually about a 15 to 20 minute block, usually, and we go through, there's some nights where it's a 3-hour night because of the sheer volume of the project applications and then people speaking, which is fine, but just so you know that that's what happens. You are not obligated to do a public presentation. You're highly encouraged to do one, but the CPC understands if you do not choose to do one, and that is entirely your organization's decision. Here, this information is in the plan. These are the questions that the CPC is asking themselves as they're scoring your project. So we're giving you the answers of what you need to provide in order to make your application successful. We have the 3 nights of presentations, then the CPC meets for 3 more nights. The first night they get together, they talk about the projects, they answer all the questions that sometimes you miss because there is a lot of information. They may ask me to get more information from a particular applicant, which I will do in time for the second meeting. In that time period between the first and the second, they will finish scoring the projects and provide me with their scores. I will tabulate them so that I can come up with a average score. So at the second meeting, what we're looking at is the projects by the highest average score to the lowest. And then they will start talking about, okay, this project, we're going to give X amount. This project, we're going to give X amount, but only for this portion of the scope that they asked for. And that's a lot of times where your funding conditions come in, because there are times when you may come in and say, well, we need the roof, the windows, the gutters, and some masonry repointing, and the CPC will say, well, we don't have enough money for all that, but we can give you the roof because you need the roof done, or we can give you the roof and the masonry, and that'll be one of your funding conditions. So as they go through, they make those determinations. At the third meeting, they review them one more time, and they take their final vote. And that vote will say the amount that they're giving or not, the category that they want it to be drawn from, and what funding conditions will be a part of that. So it's either you're recommended for funding or not recommended for funding. This accepted for future consideration is in the event that we had money left over, and then maybe we could open another smaller round come the spring. That has never happened because we've always had more ask than money. So the only recommendations that they have used so far is recommended or not recommended. If you're not recommended, you will be told why. In some cases, it's just simply they didn't have the money and your project wasn't as urgent or didn't score as high, and here's how you can make a better application for next year. And we've had organizations that came back in the next year and they were funded. It's not always that it was a bad project or it was an eligible project. Sometimes it's just that they just needed to address the more urgent, higher priority projects. So as I said, you'll be notified. Everybody will get an email from me saying whether or not what you were awarded, and you'll receive a letter. In that letter will also be the funding conditions that you and your organization, if board, whoever is responsible for making those decisions, will need to review and then confirm that you accept those funding conditions. We need to have those acceptance of those conditions before we can submit to City Council. If there's an issue with one of the conditions, and it's all in the email, I will say, please reach out to me so we can discuss, so that we can figure out what it is, because otherwise we have to go back to the CPC so that they can review and vote if there's any changes. Because once it's in the recommendation to City Council and the City Council votes on it, it's firm. So the City Council typically gets the recommendations, I would say, the first meeting in March. They refer it to the Finance Committee. And at the Finance Committee, usually myself and Jan are invited to attend to discuss why and answer questions of the Finance Committee as to why the CPC recommended a project. Excuse me. So they'll ask us questions. And it may seem at times that we're advocating for the project. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is answering why this application was so strong that the CPCs felt compelled to recommend it at the level that they did with the funding conditions that they did. The Finance Committee votes on each individual project, and then as a package, they are sent out to the City Council for final vote. They can do three things. They can approve the recommendation as is, they can reject the recommendation, or they can reduce the amount recommended by the CPC. They can't add a project that they thought, well, this really should have been funded, and they can't move money from one project to another that was recommended. Excuse me. If a project is reduced or rejected, the CPC has the opportunity with the applicant to submit information to appeal the project, denial or reduction by the City Council. And that has happened over a couple of times over the years. The City Council has been satisfied with the information and in the end has fully accepted every recommendation that the CPC has done over the last 9 years. Once that's done, you get another letter saying, yay, City Council approved you. And we'll start with the grant agreement. Then once you get the grant agreement and it's executed, I will provide you with documents. We'll do a meeting that's really brief via Zoom, just saying, here's the documents that you'll need to provide to us. There is required monitoring of project status reports every quarter. They are part of the disbursement request. So if you request a disbursement in a quarter and you submit a project status report, you don't need to do a second one in that quarter. That satisfies that requirement for that 3 months. And then at the end of the project, you have 30 days to do the final report. We do a phased disbursement. There are exceptions where a project is smaller and we do one disbursement that has happened. We've also had where you can also do a 25% advance with documentation. So if you're an organization, because the CPC felt very strongly that this process, back in 2016 when we started this, that this process needed to be available to all size organizations, from the small nonprofits that are all volunteer run to the organizations that have professional staff. And felt that it was really important that we had an opportunity to disperse funds so that the smaller organizations who didn't have as deep a pocket would be able to have that startup cash to put down deposits so that they could get the work going. And there's backup and documentation that I would go over with you, but that is an opportunity for the smaller nonprofits to start work that they might not otherwise be able to because, again, cart before the horse, they don't have $10,000 to hand over to the contractor, so we do the disbursement, they use the $10,000, they show us proof. So it enables these smaller organizations to move forward as well. And of course, if you don't spend it, you don't get it. And if you don't comply with the scope, then you have to refund it. So that's what that recapture provision, it's in your grant agreement. And then the funding acknowledgement. So this is really important, I think, because I think people walk around the city and they see things changing and they don't always know how things changed, how they were funded. We see it all the time with work in the parks or work with buildings. So this is a way for the public to know, hey, here's how your money is being spent. I have these signs in the office. You don't have to make them. You can borrow them. And then you bring them back. If it's temporary signage, if you're a bigger project and, like First Baptist made their own banner and they had everything on it. A lot of projects do that. That's fine. But it's just an acknowledgement. If you did a study, James Arnold Mansion did some work a few years ago, and the acknowledgement within the report stated that this was funded by the citizens of New Bedford through the Community Preservation Act. It's a way for you all to show the citizens how their money is being used, and also for them to understand how it's being used. And that is all I have to tell you. So, thank you. I know it's a lot, and I'm sure you all have lots going in your head right now. That is our website. On that page, you'll find the plan, the PowerPoint. I'll put the link also for this when it's up and ready, the application instructions, the eligibility determination form. I am available. My cards are there. It is my job as CPA manager to help you all through this process, not just now, but throughout the entire process. So if you have questions, email me. We can set up a time to talk if you need to, if we can't resolve it through email. You're always welcome to come to public meetings. We have public meetings on the fourth Tuesday of the month. We post the agenda. Some of them are via Zoom, and some of them are in person. We typically don't meet here because of the lovely echo. But we do not meet in March, April, August, and September because the CPC meets 6 times from January through the beginning of February. So I give them a break those months. So that's it. And if anybody has any questions, I will be happy to take them. Yes? Oh, wait, sorry.
In the historic category,
Yep.
how do you define a project? Let's say you're doing like a $2 million renovation, historic renovation of a building, and there's different components. Are you looking for, let's say I need $200,000 for the trim work, or is it's a $2 million project, we need 200 from CPA and the 1.8 million is leveraged with other funds? Like how do you describe the scope?
The CPC, so the question is, how do you have a larger project, a $2 million project, and you're only really coming for $200,000 from the CPA, for example? The CPC likes to see the larger number, because then they can see that the overall project is this, but you're asking for this phase, it's $200,000, and that's what you're requesting, because it shows that you're putting money in for the overall project. But there are some projects that have come to us and they give us just the portion, like the roof. They're only doing the roof, but they're long-term. Every year they're chipping away at something. They're doing the roof or they're doing repointing. So they're coming in with just that project cost. Say the roof was $500,000 and they asked for $250,000. So it depends is the not very clear answer, but because the CPC has seen it both ways. Okay. But if you're doing a project and you're running right through it, I would say the project budget, the overall project, and then the amount that you're asking for.
Okay.
Oh. Thank you for passing the mic.
So I have a quick question. When you put up the slide about whether a project is mandated to meet certain procurement and prevailing wage regulations, you had a possibly on the one category, which was if you were a lease,
Yep.
if you were leasing from a municipally owned building. So could you give us an example of the possibly, or is that? I'm just curious. It
I am not a
didn't seem like it
procurement.
was defined there.
Yeah, it's difficult to define it because of the relationship and how the property is leased and owned.
Okay.
It's all in the leasing agreement. So for example, the Zeitarian Theater. Zeitarian Inc. is its own entity, but the Zeitarian building itself is owned by the city. So they have to follow different rules. Excuse me. So it depends on, that's why possibly is there. I'm not a procurement expert. I can put you in touch with our purchasing department, who are the procurement experts. It's just, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm really good with these awesome vague answers, aren't I?
Yeah.
So, but it's all those, but it's very clear on certain things. Yes.
Sure.
Yes, and it has to be a long-term lease, especially if you're going for historic tax credits. You have to have a lease because historic tax credits have a certain number of years that an organization has to have the lease in between the city and their entity. So it has to have the length of the lease is also something that needs to be taken into account. And a lease is really something that needs to be in place between an organization and a city-owned property.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've read legal opinions both ways on it, but always the long-term lease
Yeah.
in place, yeah.
Yeah, the long-term lease is really important, especially with historic tax credits.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you.
Yes, oh. Thank you, Sue.
Hi, I'm the PTO president at Taylor Elementary School in the South End, and we're hoping to build a playground for our
Yes.
students. We don't have land actually at the school, so we have land that's touching school property.
Yep.
We've talked to the city about using that land, so we've been in talks with, like the Parks and Recreation. Would it be, like, I know we have to have a lead applicant, would it be Parks and Recreation, would it be school department, like, who would be, like, would it be the actual school, like, what's?
So do you have permission from, is the property, so she's asking about a property that has, it's under the Parks Department?
Yes.
But it's adjacent to the school department?
Yes.
It would be Parks Department, because it's going to be occurring on the parks, but you would probably need to loop in schools.
Yeah,
But Parks would probably be the lead,
okay.
but Parks and schools can talk about that amongst themselves and figure out who should be lead.
Okay.
But typically, the playgrounds that we have done have been on school property, so the school department has been the lead. But in that case, I would say that would be a conversation between the superintendent and Mary Raposa to determine who should be the lead on that.
Okay.
And who's going to be responsible for long-term maintenance and also accessibility, because the school playgrounds aren't accessible during school hours. School property is closed to the general public for obvious reasons. But after school hours, vacation, all that, it'd be open. So in that case, that's something you all should probably think through, about how you would do that in order to keep the property secure during school hours, but open to the public in non-school hours.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, is this something for, as far as finding the eligibility, could we, as a school, fill out the paperwork and have Parks and Rec turn it in, or how would that work?
I would have a conversation with Mary Raposa. If you haven't done that already, I would contact her to determine who's going to be the lead, if it's going to be schools or parks, and then the PTO would be second, because I'm assuming you're doing your own fundraising and
Yes.
you'd be sort of focused on pushing this through. And when I say that somebody has to be the lead, a department has to be the lead, they're not always the one that's doing it. The contact person can be the PTO president, as long as we're looping in the department head. Because a lot of the times, the reason that we have them as lead is because it's city property, first of all. Second of all, each department has its own priorities of projects and things that they're doing. So you're coming in with what it could be a very fabulous idea, but that's something that they're thinking about funding in 2 years, not next year, or it's not on their construction timeline. So that's part of the reason why you also need to have a conversation with the department heads. So I would say have a conversation with Mary, make sure you have a conversation with the superintendent and the school principal, make sure everybody's on the same page, and then whoever decides to be the lead, that would be, and then you would be second, and then you could be the point of contact for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh.
Great. Thank you so much. This is super helpful. On letters of support, do you have a minimum number or recommended number?
We don't have a minimum number or recommended number for letters of support. We've had instances where some organizations during the public comment period have had like 20-something people speak. We've had organizations that received, 15 letters of support, both during the application or after. Obviously, the more letters that you submit, the more it shows to the CPC that you've done your due diligence, that you've talked to the community, that the community is behind this project, and that maybe you've done public meetings, or you've done fundraisers, or you've been out in the neighborhood knocking on doors saying, hey, I'm doing this project. What do you think of this? And will you sign to show your support? That all shows the CPC that you are engaging the community, the people that you are saying you're going to serve with this project. So, however many. But I would ask if you have a lot of people who want to talk, because they can be really long nights, that you encourage people to write emails and letters. So, and have a few people that are designated to speak during the public presentation. Not that we don't want to hear from everybody, but as I said, we typically do at least 9 hours of these meetings every January. So, in writing is great too. Somebody else had a question? Yes, Paul. Oh, sorry.
The multiple copies that we need to submit, do those signatures have to be all original, or can they be photocopies?
No, for the copies that you need to submit, they do not need to be original signatures. Just one version has to have an original signature, and that one I keep, and then the other 11 copies can have the photocopy of that signature, so you don't have to sign it 12 times. I think Corinne had a question, and Allie had a question. Sorry. Okay.
Hi, I just had a quick question about the construction budget.
Yep.
If you're requesting reduced scope for the request, do you need the entire budget for the entire project?
If you're asking for a reduced scope of what your existing construction budget is that what you're asking?
Well, do you need a construction budget for the entire project, or for the project that you're making the
For
request?
this portion, because
Yes.
for some projects, like a First Baptist or Capital or Strand, they're 25, 50% through. So I would say you can show what remains on your project.
Okay.
If that's a budget you have, or you can show the budget and then put a brief explanation with it saying, we've done X amount or X percentage, and this is how much we have left to go, and this is what we're asking for. Just so it's clear to the CPC. And also, what you've spent, what you've leveraged, the money that you've received from other sources for what you've already completed, so it shows that that this money would be like the final piece. A lot of the times, the CPC is asked for either the starter piece that enables, especially for the housing projects, because, what do they call themselves now? It's not OHCD, EOHLC loves to see local support and asks for local support before they'll give state monies to housing projects. So a lot of times you'll see these projects like Temple Landing 2, which is going to break ground next year. They have 3 grants that we've been sitting on because they've been going through round and round and round, and finally they were awarded the funding. But if they didn't have those 3 grants, the state wouldn't have given them the money. So the CPC acknowledges that there are times when they have to put monies in that they know they're going to hold on to, so that these projects can get all the various pieces of funding together so that they can go to closing and they can break ground. So that's one instance where they actually don't have to be shovel ready. So whatever portion you want to show, that's fine. Okay? And I think Ally had a question too.
Hi. So regarding the new eligibility thing with the certificate of good standing, do city departments have to do that as well?
No, sorry, should have brought that up. So city departments do not have to have a certificate of good standing. However, if you're partnering with a nonprofit, that is a nonprofit, and we can talk about that, like, because PTOs sometimes operate at the school. Call me if you have a question about it. Do not, disqualify yourself because you think you don't. Call me. We'll work through it. But no, city departments don't have to do the certificate of voter corporation because you're not a corporation. You don't have to do the tax compliance, and you do not have to do the certificate of good standing. And I mean, you could do your board because in your case, the library has a board. You can include that, but yeah. So.
Figure it'd be whichever city department got in first got to pay the $12. And
Yeah, can you imagine? I think I would be in trouble because there'd be a lot of department heads going, why are you making my staff spend $12? I don't know. I didn't answer that question. Silly me, sorry. So I appreciate your patience and your attention during this. It is a lot. This has been, every year I tweak it just a little bit so that I can make sure that you all have the information so that you can have a successful application. So, okay, hold on.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. That's okay, Bill.
That certificate you were talking about,
Yes,
we get a certificate every year from the state.
yes,
Is that the same thing?
yes. Certificate of good standing through the Secretary of State, yes.
Yes, okay, fantastic.
If you want to scan it and send it to me so we can confirm, absolutely. But that should be the same, because if it comes from the state, because when you do your reports, your annual reports, then you should get something in return that says, yeah. So,
Okay,
yeah,
fantastic. I just was
absolutely.
double-checking that.
Just
Thank you.
reach out to me. If you have a question about any of this, please do not hesitate to scan something, call me, email. If you really want to come in the office, Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays are the best days to catch me, but I would call first. But again, I thank you all for your time and your attention tonight, and I wish you all a lot of luck. Thank you.
Did you know that you can watch any of New Bedford Cable Network shows anytime, anywhere on all of your mobile devices? How, you may ask? Just log on to nbcablenetwork.com and bam! You have all 3 channels at your fingertips: public, educational, and government access. Here, you can view our program schedules, watch our channel's live broadcasts, or search for a particular program in our vast library of shows. Last year alone, New Bedford Cable Network produced over 500 shows, and nearly all of them are available online at nbcablenetwork.com. Not only can you stay up to date with what's happening in your local government and schools, but also dive into some of New Bedford Cable Network's original award-winning programs. So check us out at nbcablenetwork.com.